through rocks, through fossils. This is what's going to help us interpret geologic time. So welcome to section 4, where we do just that. So let's first talk about the relative geologic time scale. So there, after the work of William Smith and the recognition of fossil and fossil succession and how it's like superposition, investigation by naturalists in Europe in the 1800s resulted in the recognition of different rock bodies called systems and the construction of a composite geologic column that is the basis for the relative geologic time scale. Here's what I mean by that. So these were all different naturalists that kind of looked in the area, looked at the rocks, looked at the fossils, and started saying, this is older than that. This is older than that. So this was kind of the basis for that. This recognition, is the basis that would eventually lead to the relative geologic time scale. That's before numbers were added. So just, what occurred here, we see certain fossils and certain rock types, and that was what became the Cambrian. Over here, we see certain rocks with certain fossil types. That's the Ordovician. Again, before numbers, before kind of radiometric dating helped us figure all this out, they started to see, these different rocks with different fossils means that these kind of transpired differently throughout time. So this was the first attempt at putting kind of rocks in order from oldest to youngest based on fossils. So superposition and fossil succession. But again, they call these things different systems. So the Cambrian system, there was a naturalist named Sedgwick, studied rocks in northern Wales and described the Cambrian system without kind of paying much attention to fossils, but his system couldn't be recognized beyond the area. The Silurian system, Murchison described the Silurian system in southern Wales, but included fossils very carefully, and his system could be identified elsewhere. So these two things kind of overlapped. So this area Sedgwick was calling kind of the Cambrian system. This area Murchison was calling the Silurian system, but there was kind of an overlap. There was an overlap in these systems. So a naturalist by the name of Lapworth came along and said, you know what? Let's settle this dispute and let's just call this the Ordovician. So let's just call it a different system. So we have the Cambrian here, then the Ordovician, and then the Silurian. And kind of coming back, you can see Ordovician, Cambrian, Silurian. So starting to divide these up by rocks and fossils. This is older, this is younger, and starting to go from there. Fast forward. You know what? Before we get any more into it, let me give you another part of the super secret code. It is the number 4. You got me, the number 4. One more time, the number 4. Sedimentary rock units may belong to one system in one area and to another system in another area. I'm going to throw a lot of terminology your way. This gets a little boring, so just stick with me, all right? At some locations, a particular rock unit straddles the boundary between kind of different systems. So we need terminology that deals with kind of both not only rock types defined by their rock and fossil content, but also time expressing or related to geologic time. So we'll talk about kind of these 4 different kind of units, 2 based on rock and fossil content, 2 based on time. So lithostratigraphic units, these rocks, are based on rock type with no consideration of time or origin, or time of origin, The basic lithostratigraphic element is something called the formation, which is a mappable rock body. It has distinctive boundaries above and below, and a formation may consist of a single rock type, such as the Redwall limestone in the Grand Canyon, or a variety of rock types, such as the Morrison Formation in the Grand Canyon. And formations can be subdivided into members or groups or collected together into groups and supergroups. But the formation is the basic element of lithostratigraphic units. So this is just a cross-section of Capitol Reef National Park in Utah, looking at the different lithostratigraphic units. So if we collect groups together, that's known as a supergroup. We can break that up into a group. We can break groups up into formations. We can break formations into members. And we can break members up into beds. Remember individual beds that we can see with the bedding planes in between? We talked about that earlier. Biostratigraphic units is a body of strata recognized based only on the fossil content. All right, so looking at rocks by not necessarily rock content, but now fossil content. The boundaries do not correspond to those necessarily of the lithostratigraphic units. The fundamental unit here is the biozone. We're not going to talk too much about this stuff, but the different biozones include total range, consecutive range, partial range, assemblage biozones. I mean, again, we're not going to talk too much about these, but anyway, I thought I'd mention that. Let's move on. So let's get into the kind of time-based categories. Let's talk about time stratigraphic units. So time stratigraphic units consist of rocks deposited during a particular interval of geologic time. The basic time stratigraphic unit is the system, and we can break the time stratigraphic units down into eonothem, erythems, systems, series, and stages. This is another one won't get too much into. However, time units we've already worked with, and we will continue to do those. They designate simply certain parts of geologic time. The period is the most commonly used time designation. I've mentioned this in the past. 2 or more periods make up an era. 2 or more eras make up an eon. But you can also break down periods into smaller units. But the period is the most common one that we use. The time stratigraphic unit system corresponds to that of the period. So the different time units, we have eons, eras, periods, epochs, and ages. So time units and lithostratigraphic units are the ones we'll probably deal with, or you'll hear most. So you'll hear about groups and formations and members and beds, and you will hear about time units, eras, eons, etc., because that forms the basis of the geologic time scale. Excuse me. So time units and lithostratigraphic units are the most commonly ones we will discuss. Some of the other ones might pop up, but those are the main two. So let's go ahead and pause here, and we're going to figure out when we come back one more section. I don't know if it'll be 1 or 2 videos, but the correlation of everything. Now, matching up rocks with fossils and talking about the different lithostratigraphic units and the time units, and we're really assembling that geologic time scale. All right. So anyway, I'll see you back here in just a second.